Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. Today's topic is submitting the official proposal for your final year undergraduate project. The direct audience for this video is obviously our third year undergraduates. If you're not one of them, you're welcome to hang around and pick up some tips for when it will be your turn to do this. The deadline is imminent, just in a few days, and a number of people are very worried, and I witnessed this firsthand because I am supervisor of about a dozen of them and overseer for another 10. So today's video is just a few words of advice to reassure you and help you put things into perspective, why all this is happening and should you be worried about anything, or how should you take it. If you like this video or find it useful, stick a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more helpful videos like this one weekly. So first of all, why do we make you do a final year project in the first place? What's the point of all this? The project is worth 1/4 of your marks, so it's kind of a big deal. And we make you do a large project. For most of you, is the largest software project you've done so far. And we give you a chance to write a coherent piece of English prose that describes stuff that you have done. And for most of you, it will be the longest piece of prose you've written so far, about 40 pages. And it has to all tie together and make sense. And 40 pages sound like a lot. I had never written 40 pages, but by the time you get into there, you will find it's difficult to constrain all you wanted to say in only 40 pages. So it will also be an exercise in editing and trimming down and removing the fat and keeping only the substance of what you want to say. You don't believe it now, but when you get there in a few months, you will see that you would like to have more space than you are allocated. This project is also a chance to let you make plans, such as the plan you are proposing now. Your proposal that you submit is in fact a plan for the work you're going to do this year, and experience how things don't actually always go to plan, and then figuring out how you can remedy the things that went wrong, and in general sort out problems and taking responsibility for your own success. So it is something that we want to be broadly scripted, but we also want you to have the experience of how things don't always follow the script, and you figure out in this kind of safe playground environment how to deal with those things. And finally, this project is essentially giving you a chance to showcase the competent computer scientist you have become after investing 3 years in the computer science tripos at Cambridge. So it's a chance for you to show off the stuff you do best. It's the part of the exam where you choose the question, because you decide what the project is going to be, and you're going to be judged not on what the examiner wants, but on what you had chosen was your favorite thing. And then this showcase is something you can reuse. For example, when you go for your first job interview, there's not much else you have done besides going to university, maybe doing a couple of summer internships. And so besides the final grade you get, this is one thing that distinguishes from other people who got the same grade. I have worked on X, which is my specialty now and my favorite topic, and I've done all these things and I've learned all these other things. And this is something that can fill up the time when they say talk about what you're good at during your interview. All right, so at Cambridge we have this special system, and lots of guidance and help, including having 2 overseers that are assigned to you and who check out your project before you're allowed to do a final submission. Why are these 2 overseers so critical of your proposal? You have to pass the approval of these overseers, and they seem to find niggles with almost everything. Why is that? Well, it is meant to help you, not to annoy you. You have many people in the system who are looking out for you. Most importantly, of course, your project supervisor. That's the person you're going to see maybe every week throughout the year to discuss how your project is going and what else you should be doing, and you can turn to for help and specific advice. than your director of studies in college, which is usually a different person. Sometimes it could be the same person. Your director of studies is also a project supervisor, but that doesn't have to be like that. And that's always someone who, throughout the tripos, has been looking out for you and giving you advice and guidance on how to navigate through your university time. And then this special extra thing that we do for the final year project is time consuming for us, but it adds value for you, is the overseers, who are totally independent people. They're not from your college generally, and they have nothing to do with the project. They're not the people who supervise it, but they have to approve your proposal before you're allowed to start on your project. Everybody has to have their proposal approved by these overseers. So they're often seen as some kind of gatekeepers, like the bad guys. And your focus might be to, I need to get past them so that I finally get approval and I can get going with my project. Well, that's, I would suggest, the wrong view, the wrong way to view the overseers. You may not look quite like that, but overseers also are totally on your side. Most of what you hear from overseers is criticism, but they're giving you this criticism so that you have a chance to fix things before they become serious problems. If you didn't have the overseers telling you now in October that X is no good, then you'd go ahead with X as is, and you would then find problems later, which become bigger the more time passes. And maybe you'd only hear that X was a problem when the examiners give you a lower mark than you expected. So when you hear the overseers criticize something now, don't argue with them, just fix it. If they misunderstood something, you say, well, it's their fault. I said I want to do something. They thought I was doing something else. Well, take it as a hint that the way you explained it might mislead the reader, or at least some readers. And so you should explain more clearly, because others might also misunderstand, for example, your examiners, and you'll have no other chance to fix it. You have a chance to fix it now. You won't have a chance to fix it later. So, as I said at the times, you should write not merely so that it is possible to understand you, but so that it is practically impossible that you will be misunderstood. That's a completely different standard. As I said earlier, I'm overseer for 10 students, and I'm director of studies for another 12 final year students. So I've seen my fair share of proposal drafts in the past couple of weeks. And here are common issues to watch out for, which crop up repeatedly. So first of all, what is your success criterion? Say that explicitly. Make a section, a subsection that says success criterion, my success criterion, or my success criteria, if you have several, are these. So how can anyone tell, an external observer who's not particularly familiar with your project, maybe just picks it up and reads it for the first time, how can they tell if your project went well? And how can they tell how well it went, if it went well? Some of them, the examiners, must assign a numerical quantitative value to the question of how well did it go. So your success criterion must be some kind of thing that is easy to verify and also to falsify. It cannot be a vague, hand-wavy thing. It cannot be a subjective thing. And it cannot be something that only a domain expert would understand, because you will get a couple of examiners and at least one of them will not at all be in your subject. So anyone, including examiners not in your subject, must be able to understand the success criterion easily and easily verify whether you've met it or not and to what extent. The next most common thing that's an issue is, how are you going to evaluate your project? If you promise you're going to write a compiler, for example, many people as their project write a compiler for some language or other. What will you put in your evaluation chapter? Okay, I've written the compiler. Well, that's not enough. Common answers include some kind of performance metrics. How long it takes to compile a program, how long does the compiled program take to run, how big is the executable that's produced, and so on. These are numbers that are easy to produce, easy to measure, easy to compare against other those produced by other compilers, and it's easy to plot them into graphs. But they are not necessarily the most useful metrics. They're numbers that are easy to obtain, but not the most informative evaluation of your compiler project. How are you going to convince me that the compiled code that you produced actually does what the source code said it would do? how are you going to convince me that there are no subtle bugs in the compilation? So if I'm talking about a compiler, I think I'm rather more interested in whether it produces correct code than whether it's fast at compiling the source into incorrect code. So how are you going to convince me? Are you going to provide proofs? That's maybe unlikely in the scope of a Part 2 project. Are you going to provide tests? That's maybe more common. Where do the tests come from? Do they give good coverage? Who actually wrote the tests? If it's a well-known test suite, I'm going to be more confident in it than if you wrote the tests yourself, maybe because the language is a language that you defined to begin with, or it's some kind of subset for which the standard test suite would not work. So you have to take out some of the tests from the standard test suite. And then at that point, how can the reader have any confidence that you didn't just run all the tests in the well-known test suite and then you just excluded the ones that your program didn't pass, which of course is a slightly dishonest way of assessing the quality of your product. So good answers to this kind of questions is what makes a solid evaluation chapter. And every student finds the evaluation chapter to be the hardest chapter to write. So it's really helpful to plan ahead for the evaluation chapter so that we are all sure that there's going to be something for you to put into it that's going to make it look good. Another thing is having a timeline for your project with too little detail. You do need to say, and it is one of the specifications, what you're planning to do in each of the 2-week chunks of the year from now until submission. It's actually unlikely that you will do exactly what you say 2 weeks by 2 weeks, but it is still essential that you have some kind of plan, detailed plan, which means you've thought about it. At the start of the project, you've got some realistic idea about how long the various parts will take. If you have written it down, even if it's wrong, we can at least have a useful discussion about whether your estimates are realistic. If you haven't written it down in detail, then we can't, and then without an agreed plan, you're just preparing for trouble. Your supervisor and your overseer, if they see a detailed plan, can tell you, well, some of your estimates are too optimistic. I mean, it's unlikely that this type of job you can do in 2 weeks. No. You should plan for at least a month or maybe a month and a half for that. But they can only give you that feedback if you express your estimates explicitly in a detailed timeline. Related to that, a common mistake here is underestimating how long it will take you to write the dissertation, which ultimately is the only thing that gets marked. So it's kind of a big deal, the dissertation. You want to do a good job on that. Now, I gave rather more detailed advice about writing the dissertation in a dedicated video, which you should check out now, even if you won't have to start writing for a few more months. It's still very useful stuff. Anyway, after writing your draft, you should give your supervisor time to read the draft and comment on it. So it's unrealistic to say, slot n, I give the draft to my supervisor. Slot n+1, I implement the corrections from my supervisor. So you should interleave a couple more slots with other activities before going back to the dissertation to implement the corrections. I generally advise the students for whom I'm Director of Studies to send their dissertation to the supervisor a week or two before the Easter term restarts. Because you need to allow for the fact that, first of all, your supervisor won't get back to you immediately because it takes some time to read it, and also they may have other things to do, including they are supervising other students. And also, you should take into account that when they get back to you with some feedback, some of this feedback may be trivial things that you can do in an afternoon, but some other things could be more substantial stuff. So, you have to redo some of the work because it doesn't come across well at all. It looks like something's missing, and so you should add an extra experiment or something like that. So in that case, you need to give yourself time for that in your planning. At the time you get the feedback, some of this feedback might cause you to do more work, which is not just correcting a sentence. And besides that, you will want to spend much of your Easter term revising for your exams, which are worth the other 3/4 of your final marks. Okay, so the project is 1/4, but there's another 3/4 which you earn by doing well in your exams. So it's good to have most of the write-up of the dissertation already done before Easter term starts, because 3/4 is even more important than 1/4 after all. Another thing that you need to be wary of is promising that you will come up with, for example, an algorithm for doing X. And as far as you know, there's no such algorithm in the literature, so you will have to invent your own new algorithm. Now, if we, like the worldwide scientific community, we don't know how to do it, that's called research. And it's exciting. It's one of the great things we do in great universities. But it's a really bad idea to try to do research in your undergraduate project. Do research in your graduate studies, in your master's degree to a limited extent, or in your PhD as the core of that higher degree. The PhD is all about research. Okay, you want to do research, do these other things. But not at undergraduate level. We discourage you from doing research in your final year project. What we want at undergraduate level is for you to show off the skills you picked up in the tripos by putting them into practice by doing something concrete. I also have another video about the whole process of the final year project. Worth revising that at this stage, although you are under time pressure. So you'll have to write some code, use some good software engineering practice, comply with specifications, implement protocols, interface with other people's code, maybe even get your soldering iron out and build a piece of hardware, and that kind of stuff. And that's all things that will demonstrate that you have become a mature computer scientist, ready to go on and do great things. But you should do that in the context of some project that we all know can be done before you start doing it. So, for example, re-implementing something that exists that's well known, but adding some new twist, or making it go faster, or using some new technology that wasn't there the first time that this was done. That's all good for an undergraduate project. Now, doing something that nobody has done before, that's too risky. What happens if you can't do it either? After all, nobody's done it, so you shouldn't be to blame if you can't do it. Nobody else has done it. But we don't want you to fail your project for that, because then you lose 1/4 of your marks for your final year. So instead, pick a project where your success depends on the good computer science work you do, not on whether you can crack an unsolved problem. That's unsuitable at this level. So, you're given these 2 overseers to look after your proposal. How do you get the most out of your overseers? Well, they are there to give you early warnings that your proposal might be unsuitable because of issues such as the ones above or others similar to that. It may sound to you like they are incessantly nagging and only issuing criticism and annoying negative things, but actually everything they say is gold nuggets that you should value and treasure. If they have any doubt, at least they're telling you about it. I mean, the format in which they express their advice may sound negative and may also be affected by the fact that the deadlines are very short for you. They're even shorter for them because you have to multiply everything by 10. So I have to send feedback to 10 people. You have to only write 1 proposal. So the examiners won't tell you about the problems. They can't tell you about the problems. All they can do is just give you a lower grade. And by then there's nothing else you can do. You've already submitted. Whereas here, when the overseers tell you about some problem, you can do something about it. And you had better do it. And be very grateful for receiving this early criticism. It's only there to help you. The overseers don't give you any kind of grade. And the critique from the overseers of your proposal does not in any way enter into the computation of your project mark. So it's completely, your friends. They're just experts that give you useful advice in private so that you have a chance to do better with your actual submission. They're kind of a mock examiners, and it's a free run. Okay, so you can, whatever you do in this trial performance doesn't affect your real performance. So and also you may talk back to your overseers. You can ask them questions and they'll reply to you, unlike the examiners who mark your project who can't reply. And remember that the overseers are experienced people who've generally been examiners in the past, so they know how it works from the other side of the table. So make the most of them. Ask them questions if you're unsure. Do you think that this will be given credit? Do you think that the fact that I'm learning a new language is something that will be valid, or is this something that's supposed to be something that happens and only what I do, as opposed to what I learn, will get credit? You can ask them those questions. So yes, while I understand it may may be a pain to keep fiddling with your proposal until you manage to satisfy every niggle that's expressed by your examiners. Please do it religiously. Don't do it to please them. Do it to save yourself from getting into trouble later, and do it to produce a better project overall. They are experienced people who are investing their time and expertise to help you perform at the best of your potential. And from the viewpoint of the overseers, it would be much easier just to say, yes, it's all fine, and not give you any criticism, but you wouldn't get any of the benefits. If you find this video useful, stick a like on it, feel free to ask further questions in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more videos to help you perform at your best. Thank you for watching.